Hey, I'm really excited to share this video with you. In this video, I cover setting up a Schecter Hellraiser guitar for playing in drop A-sharp tuning. I show in depth how I do fret dress. I do the profiling. You're going to learn a lot. And on top of that, I go into some details on how we get the Floyd Rose floated bridge to be sitting parallel to the body. It's a torque balance situation, and I think, don't be afraid, it's going to all make sense by the end of the video. Hope you enjoy it. This is one for the shredders and for the people that are really into setup.
This is Michael's Schecter Hellraiser. It's a beautiful guitar. He has a special request that it be set up to play in drop B tuning or drop A sharp, which I think of as drop B flat, but anyway, I'm no expert on that. So he has a Floyd Rose floated bridge and locking nut, and we want to get it. First off, I'm going to do an intake assessment to see what the tune is currently, and then see what kind of relief and action it has. There's already a problem with the bridge being kicked at a severe angle because of the low tension on these standard gauge strings. So I had suggested going with heavy gauge strings, D'Addario EXL 158, I believe they are. They're sort of recommended for drop B tuning, and that should get them in the right tension range where it'll feel sort of like playing 10s, but I think these are 13s. They go up to 68 or something on the low E. This should be a fun project, and I can keep you posted as we go along. It's low. So I have my Strobe Plus powered up, although the battery's threatening to die on me. And get a quick look at what it says in playing position. That's an A sharp right there. And then we've got an F, A sharp, D sharp, G, C. So checking what I found for drop A sharp tuning, that makes sense. It should be A sharp, F, A sharp, D sharp, G, and C. And I'm not a shredder. I don't play that much metal music. I do drop D tuning sometimes, but I don't know what to do with this thing. So I'll leave it to the experts, and I'll get it set up really well. So playing this through my amp, I notice it doesn't seem to have high output. It's soft, pretty low volume. So to compensate for that, I go through the crunch channel. I get a little more pop. And a couple things I've noticed. There was a little scratching on the 3-position switch. So that might have gone away now. Probably need to spray anyway. And it has these pull volume controls. I assume that's for split coil or something. I'm not hearing much difference, so I don't know. But there's an example where if you really bang on the low E string, the low A sharp string in this case, it rattles against the frets somewhere along this length, probably right around the 12th fret, because that's where the biggest displacement's going to be. So there's another thing I noticed that is worth considering. The action I'm going to measure as it sits, because the bridge is kicked back at an angle this way. It has also had the effect, because the support points are up front, of lowering the action relative to what it would be if the bridge was sitting parallel. In other words, I'll probably have to lower the action when I get the bridge sitting square. Alright, a couple of simple measurements. I'm going to read the neck, but just wanted to double check the scale length. We thought it was 25.5, and I measure from the nut to the 12th fret, 12 3/4. So you double 12 3/4, that's 25.5. I'll be able to use the 25.5 inch scale length notched rule to read the neck, and right away I can see that there's a fair amount of dish in it. So right off the bat, checking the relief at the 8th fret for starters, it's 16 thousandths of an inch, which is quite a lot. It's also surprising where the string tension has been backed off so much to achieve the drop A-sharp tuning. You would expect the truss rod would be pulling maybe even into a back bow condition, or certainly a shallower relief, but there's quite a lot of relief. Now that might be a point where someone had managed to get less fret buzz with these low tension strings. Maybe a little more relief achieved that through a truss rod adjustment. I'm not certain of that yet, so we'll have to see. The 16 thousandths of an inch of relief I measured on the frets is mimicked by the 8th fret clearance. Like a 16 thousandths of an inch shim easily goes under there. So the frets are following the neck pretty well, at least in here, and there is this bow. Now, rather than walk you through every one of the next steps, I'll tell you that what I'm going to do is check the action next. I'll check the action at the 12th fret and look up the Schecter specs and see if they also look for it at the 15th or something like that. And I'm going to check the height over the 1st fret from open, and then I'll also do the trick where we put the capo on the 3rd and then look at the clearance between the 1st fret and the string. It's a good way of knowing how the nut is sitting relative to everything. With this locking nut, it should be in pretty good shape. Pull off the cover for the springs and the floating Floyd Rose. So give me a chance to spray the 3-position switch too. Yeah, there was just enough interference to keep that from coming up. Good. Shielding on the control cavity. Oh yeah, you can see the bridge is close to slammed right now. Okay, this is interesting. As I start tuning this up to normal range, I've got the 6th string up to E. The action's like 43 thousandths here. It peaks it on the 4th string at 57 thousandths. Here's a very simple approach to blocking the bridge. Couple of 3/16 inch chunks of wood. Actually, one probably will do it. This one's loose now, so looks a little something like that. Well, it took a while, but I've got this roughly at standard tuning. But look at what's happened to the bridge in the process of pulling up to tension.
being kicked down, it's kicked way up. So, that's going to raise the action. So it's standard tuning with more tension. The relief checks at 27 thousandths of an inch. So now I can turn this over and block it and remove the strings and get the frets dressed and cleaned up, fretboard, and move forward from there. So I'm checking the fingerboard and the frets. I already checked the neck again with the strings off, and then tighten the truss rod about about a third of a turn, which is 2 1/6 turns. With a hex driver, it takes a 4mm Allen wrench, and with a 160-degree turn and then another 60-degree turn. So it's about a third of a turn. And then reading the neck, it is the 14 inches as advertised. A little bit of finger wear here. Using backlight helps you see this. Found that with the fingerboard dead straight, the frets here from about 12 to 17 are a little bit low. That's measured by feeler gauge under a rule that spans along. So this 1 mil thick actually fits under there. But the fingerboard is straight, so the frets want to be straight to that. And as I first touch with a 14-inch radius sanding block, it's hitting preferentially in the outsides, which means the frets were dressed to more of a 12-inch radius or something like that. No, actually a shallower radius, like a 16, I guess. Yeah, that would make sense. So, with the correct 14-inch radius, I'm catching the ends, not the center. And this is just really reading it with the sandpaper at this point. Trying to run it coaxially so that the cylinder lines up with the cylinder. And of course I have the pickups masked off to protect them. And almost all of the Sharpie is coming up. You know, I went along and darkened up the crowns of the frets before I started doing this. And it's still I'm at the point where I'm not really removing material so much as I'm reading the neck, or the frets. And yet at this point, this is pretty much all cleaned up on the first fret. Just a little residual left. And it looks pretty good down to here, and then these need a little bit of work. So in order to get these cleaned up, I'll have to bring them all down a little bit. But I'll hit a happy balance, so I don't remove a whole ton of fret material. At this point where I've used the radius block and cleaned up most of the Sharpie marks on the frets, I want to read the neck and get an idea of how much light I see. And it looks very well behaved. There might be a little light right here. That has cleaned up already, so I already went along with the fret rocker and checked that I don't have any severe rocking action. I've taken a little bit of material off. I've got some flats on here on the crowns of the frets that I have to now profile, but it looks pretty good. Fretboard looks ready, stem to stern. In preparation for crowning the frets, I go along and re-sharpie the tops of each fret. The top of each fret. That takes me up a little high. It's got to go. Yeah, so this looks like the one I want to use. But the proof is in the pudding. After I take a few strokes, I'll get a better idea. Yeah, this fixed tighter radius one, I kind of know that points to it best. It seems to just work best on pretty much every fret I've ever profiled, I've ever crowned. So. Why is that? I don't know. Yeah, it does look like a good fit. So. It's a bit tighter of a radius than this one. I don't know if you can see that, but this is a tighter radius. In other words, the radius of curvature is smaller, so it's going to crown it more. Yeah, it's pretty good. So it's funny when you get, it's hard to explain, but you get to a point where you've cleaned up the fret and it looks like there's still Sharpie on it. This is the fret I've been crowning, and I think it's very hard to see, and regardless what the lighting is, the effect I'm talking about, but it looks almost like there's still Sharpie on it. You don't really see it too well here, but it's sort of orangish brown, and so it kind of throws you off, but it's had enough crowning work, so let me do the one next to it and maybe you can see the difference. Develop as I run the tool over it. This establishes the profile you want, and then you do the sanding to get it better. So I don't know if you can see, this one still hasn't really cleaned up. One way I can deal with that, start with this one for a second. Where it's a flatter radius, it's going to hit the top more. You see that. Anyway, we work along, and then we fret rock again, and then we polish with increasing grades of sandpaper. I'll try to show you what it looks like to polish a couple frets with sandpaper. This is 400 grit that I start with. I try and rattle on the crown initially, catch the ends, take care of any edge that may have formed along here or back here, and sideways, I should say down the side, and then back and forth on the top, reinforcing that profile because this bends around the crown. I'll do the adjacent frets also. And then if I should ever sort of, sometimes the stick walks off on its own direction like that, it'll leave a little chatter mark or tool mark or whatever. the grit kind of leaves a bit of a trail. And you've got to take care of that. You don't want to be seeing that. So this takes a fair amount of patience, but it does go quickly. And this is the part that you really need the fretboard, the fingerboard covered for, because otherwise this corner is going to destroy the wood in between frets. Okay. Helps to mark your stopping point so you know where to come back to. Now all these fret wires are nicely crowned. They have a nice radius going this way, so that they're rounded off this way from using the 400 grit sanding stick. And what remains is to take the fret rocker and ensure that we don't have any high spots. Okay, so this guy's a little bit high here, so what I do is I go through and mark locations where there's a high spot. Make sure I've got that on there right. Yeah, well, that's okay. So the fret rocker has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides of differing lengths. So in the real low number frets, you use the longest side. Okay, and there is a high spot there. When there's rocking, that means the middle of the 3 frets you're spanning has a high point. So it's high in the center there. It's not high on the bass side. It is high on the treble side. So I put individual marks, center, bass, and treble, so I know where to work those frets. Now there's no way to read this one, right? Except if it was particularly high, you'd notice a big valley. So as you proceed along, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, this one has a high spot here. So you proceed down the neck doing this, and I'll get those high spots knocked down, keeping the rounded form. And once you've done that, you can then go to the finer polishing, 800 grit, and then with a nice protected neck, I'll use steel wool, and then vacuum up everything very carefully to make sure I get all the steel wool dust off. Some people prefer to use other techniques, but that seems to work well for me. I'm going handheld for this shot so I can move along the neck. Hopefully it stays in focus. Try and show the pattern that results where the high spots were found on these frets after using the fret rocker. So they're all marked up, and I'll go to each spot and work that down to where it's no longer rocking, and then I'll move forward. Here I'm using the 800 grit sandpaper stick. Just a brief enough period of time on each one to go from the finish from the 400 to the 800. I don't want to take off material per se. I'm just trying to, you might say, polish up the frets. Partly cosmetic, partly so that the string slides across them nicely. After this I'll use 4/0 steel wool. Now this is the kind of steel wool you want to use. It's marked 40. I call it 4/0. It's just a fast way to say it. You don't need much. You just pull out a little wad like that.
And since we've already done 400 and 800 grit sandpaper, it goes pretty fast. You can see the surface polishing up pretty quickly. I'm exerting thumb or finger pressure directly on the crown of the fret. That's what you're trying to polish. My arm's in the way on some of this, I realize that. I'll try and do one left-handed. It's not going to work right for me, but that's the idea. But I have better feel with my right hand. So I'll keep doing this down the length of the neck. Now it's not enough to just vacuum the fingerboard. I go through with a brush and make sure I loosen up the stuff that might otherwise stick. This is going to get loud, so I'll adjust the volume for you. And then I take a piece of old t-shirt or whatever. Dislodge anything that might be right there. Good time to vacuum the bench too, so I'll do that. But I won't put you through watching that. Yeah, there's a lot of metal dust there, and it could get back on the pickups because of their magnets. So this has to all be cleaned up before any of this protection comes off. And the fingerboard needs to get a drink after I get this all the tape removed. And so I want to give you a look at the neck and the body after I've cleaned this up. Fingerboard is in great shape. The frets are in great shape. That's with the boiled linseed oil on the fingerboard and the frets all polished up. I found a tip in someone's YouTube video showing how to string and tune a Floyd Rose. And the most painful thing is the first thing you take the string out of the bag and you cut the ball off. So this is the second string ready to go. It had a purple ball on it. This is that custom set, the XL 158. So the high E is a 13 thousandths of an inch, 13 mil, 0.013. And the low E is a 62 mil, 0.062 inch. So I cut the ball off the second string. Oh, and the other tricky thing, first off, when you loosen the strings and take them out, these little slugs, these metal pieces will fall right out if you turn the guitar upside down. So you have to be careful of that. And secondly, then just getting these in there. Yeah, it goes right in after you cut the ball off, right? That much is easy.
So if you can get your finger on the head of the screw, which isn't always the case, there's already some tension on from the first 3 strings that I put on, so that makes it easier. And the screws aren't buried down in the cavity there either. So you just give, I don't know, that's maybe 4 inch-pounds or something. Who knows? But you definitely don't want to like crank on it with the long end of the Allen wrench. Just use the short end to keep from over tightening it. And dress it along here. I usually cut 1.5 distances. So if this is the distance from one tuner to the next, I do like 1.5 of those distances, or maybe 2. So to go into this one, I want to mark it. That'd be 1. That's 1.5. Maybe a little bit more than 1.5. That's what you want to wrap around the post, but you have to give yourself a little extra to go through the post and then make a right angle bend. So you want to keep pressure on the string, keep force on the string as you wind it around the post. The string winder comes in really handy for this. You want to make sure that it's wrapping down on the tuning machine. Okay, so let's get a look at the tuner. And this is the second string, which is supposed to be at a G. So this tip I found, okay, that's G sharp. So this tip I found online was to go inside out, starting with the 4th string, which wants to be at an A sharp, and that had been at a B or so, and as the other strings take over, it lowers the tension of the 4th string. So it's slightly sharp for an A sharp, and I'm going to leave it there. This should be an F, and it's an F sharp, and I'm going to leave it there. The 3rd string should be a D sharp, and it's an F, which is a little too sharp. I had it there earlier, and that's the wrong tuning post. So D sharp to E, and then this at an A is a little bit sharp on the 2nd string. So what's left is the 1st and 6th strings, and then I'll start hunting them in to get them close to where they should be. So now I'm checking the status of the lock here. So the wood that I'd used to lock the bridge in place, they fell out because there's enough tension on the bridge now. I'm starting to really like this. Looks good. So there was no problem getting a 62 thousandths sixth string into the bridge on the Floyd Rose. Come to here and give myself about 1.5. Oh, you don't want to cut it too short, that's for sure. These big strings are hard to fit on the tuning post as they wrap up though. So not easy to bend either. Alright, let's go. Tuning machine hidden by the cardboard. Oh, this is a beefy string. So this is like stringing a bass. This is like a bass guitar string. 62, huh? It's a monster. I think I've got just enough room for it on the post there. That's my A sharp, which when I stretch the string, it's going to become something a lot flatter than that. Okay, that looks pretty well behaved. E, that should be an F. Flat, there we go. So let's get the 1st string on, and it wants to be a C. Okay, so I've got the strings on, and they're tuned up to pitch, and this bridge was pulled way too far forward. It was racked forward from all the tension, because these strings require a normal amount of tension to get into the right tuning range, this drop A sharp. normal amount of tension, meaning similar to if you use 10s and you're tuning in regular standard tuning. So that means I dropped 1.5 turns. I loosened each string 1.5 turns on the tuning machines, and that brought the bridge down a little bit. And then I found that if I pushed the bridge to where I have it parallel to the body, so in other words, push the bridge down the extra little distance it takes to get it about parallel to the body, I get close to the A sharp tune. So then what I need to do is tighten these screws right here to tighten the springs to pull that bridge back. The way I do this is I put protection on the butt end of the back of the guitar here to protect so I don't scratch this. I use a very long Phillips head driver in my drills, and then you have to push really hard to ensure that you engage the screw head enough to drive it in. Okay. And we do a little bit at a time. As I said, you have to really push hard to do a little bit at a time and then check the status. So that's still up pretty good. I'm going in the right direction. Heavy duty springs came in. So I've already removed 2 of the silver ones. I got 1 of the orange heavy duty springs in. Put another one over here. And I had checked to see how the bridge behaved with just the 1 heavy duty one in. I'd already pulled the screws out a little bit. Oh, we're getting there. Alright, there we go. In the cavity we see the 3 orange springs, the higher tension springs. And this is almost parallel already, so we'll just have to tighten a little bit. That's looking pretty good. The bridge is parallel, we're close to tune. So just have to sneak up on it. Let's have a look at the bridge. That is as parallel as you're going to get it. Yay. Victory. Well, now that I have the guitar tuned to drop A sharp, and the bridge is parallel to the body by adjusting the springs, now it's time to check intonation and set action. I've already measured the relief, and I've got 14 thousandths of an inch at the 8th fret, which I'm going to leave it at that for now, although I could reduce it a little bit, but I think it might help with these strings, even though they are at a higher tension than previously, to get that low frequency. They are still flopping around a little bit. So I'll try lowering the action a little bit and see where I can go before I do the final intonation. So with 1 more half turn of the treble side bridge support screw and several half turns on the bass side, I've got a 46 thousandths shim stack that fits easily into the bass side and is just about a perfect fit onto the treble side. So I don't want to go any lower on the treble side, but as I keep lowering this screw, the bass side bridge support screw, I don't seem to get any meaningful reduction in action height as measured at the 12th fret. So I looked at the bridge, and it looks like it is starting to sort of tail up a little bit. And let's see, that's going to require strengthening
springs a little bit more. So as the springs pull tighter, they lower that back end. And in so doing, I think that's going to lower the action a touch more. So we'll put our protection in place and give a slight tightening here. We're going to go for a little more tension, pulling that tailstock back. These stronger springs are really doing the trick. I'll return the original ones to the owner in case he wants to change his tuning at some point. And that's got the bridge looking like it's actually tailing down a little too much, so I may have to loosen that back up. But before I do, I want to check the tune, because we've got that torque balance going on. We want to make sure that we're in tune. And that's a little sharp. So if I just went ahead and tuned it, I'd be reducing the tension. That would cause us to fall back more. That tells me that I overcompensated. I need to loosen the strings a little. I need to loosen the springs a little. We'll have a look at that. That looks parallel to me, and we'll double check tuning and then we'll check action again. Yeah, that's just a little bit sharp there. Now with the springs adjusted to get a level bridge and tuned back to drop a sharp, my 46 thousandths of an inch shim still goes under there easily, and the fits to closer fit on the treble side. Alright, I got this baby in playing position and tuned it up and playing through the amp. There's a lot of fret buzz up in here. I need to have it a little bit higher so that we don't get wicked fret buzz. It's this is what gets me. So to take care of this fret buzz, I'm going to raise the action back up a little bit on the bass side. Because I set it up with the strings off and the neck straight and ran the fret rocker up and down, I know that I'm not getting fret buzz from poor profile. Yeah, it just needs the action to go up a little bit, so that's going to require the 3mm Allen wrench in here and going counterclockwise. Well, as I've said before, I'm no metal guitar player, but we've got the Floyd Rose set up properly, intonated, obviously tuned to pitch. The pickups jacked up a little bit, a little more response. Sounds beautiful. The reason I do this is I'm better at fixing guitars than playing. I have much better potential for being excellent at setting up a guitar than I do for being an excellent guitar player. But I said that to my wife upstairs, and she goes, "Oh yeah, he's a good guitar player."
So what do you think of it, Michael?
This is beautiful. I love it.
Action's okay?
Action is perfect. It sounds fantastic.
You like that drop A sharp tuning?
I love it. I love it. It's been such a struggle trying to get a guitar actually into that and have everything function correctly. This is awesome.
So this is the way you want it?
This is perfect.
Awesome, dude. Give me a high five.
Thank you. I can't thank you enough.
You're welcome. Enjoy.
I will.